as we've been discussing earlier this weekend, you may have heard on yesterday's show and across our news bulletins, concerns continue to be raised about the active travel works on the Tulla Road in Ennis, particularly around road width, curb heights and emergency access. Now, local resident Angela Naughton joined us on the show yesterday to outline her concerns. Let's just have a quick recap of what Angela had to say.
Before, when you were driving down those roads and an ambulance came, or the guards came, or the fire brigade came, you heard the sirens or you saw the lights and everyone would be able to pull in, let them go by and go to an emergency. Now you can't. You can't do that because all of these lanes, the cycle lane, pedestrian, they're all curbs now. You'd have to be a lot more cautious than you are anyway if there was a cyclist there. But I'm not thinking about traffic here, about, we're stuck in traffic. I'm thinking about the emergency vehicles who have to use that road. They can't now. They can't overtake anyone. Nobody can move in. And now you could have a fire brigade stuck inside the traffic on that road for 3-4 minutes. Somebody's gone. So the first thing they should do is start looking at pulling up the curbs. And my father's actually a cyclist. He's been a cyclist all his life, racing. He was, and he's 80 now. And he personally thinks it is the most ridiculous thing that he's ever seen in his life.
Angela certainly not sitting on the fence there over her thoughts on the new active travel works on the Tulla Road in Ennis, particularly related to road safety and access for emergency vehicles, and plenty of texts coming in on this one as well. But for more on this, we are now joined by Senior Engineer with Clare County Council, Cyril Feeney. Cyril, you're very welcome to the programme.
Good morning, Daragh. Thanks for having me on.
Cyril, certainly a lot of concerns raised by residents here. There is, just for a bit of context for listeners, it's roughly a €1.8 million project. Construction began around last September. It's to create a 2.2 kilometre continuous cycle track with segregated cycle walking lanes. But it's that curbed infrastructure that's really frustrating residents. They see it as having nowhere for them to pull in the event of an emergency event, if Gardaí or if the fire service or if the ambulance service were trying to get past. They say now they don't have anywhere to pull in as there is a gap between one raised curb and the footpath to facilitate that cycle lane. And they say that the curb is quite high as well and far too high for their vehicles. Certainly you can hear Angela's concerns there. Could you just talk us through the rationale for designing the curbs like this, designing the active travel infrastructure, and does it comply with national standards?
Yeah, well, Daragh, to your first point there regarding the national standards, I mean, the design scheme on the Tulla Road is absolutely designed in accordance with the design manual for urban roads and streets. And this is, I suppose, perhaps new to a lot of people. We don't tend to see it a lot in more of the out of Dublin or rural context. So you see a lot of this type of infrastructure in the big cities. So this is our first, I suppose, major intervention in the road network in Ennis and County Clare. So the scheme is designed in accordance with, as I say, the design manual and the cycle design manual. And the curbs that you've referenced to are deliberately at the height they're at. And that is to protect the vulnerable road users, which are the cyclists and pedestrians who will be using this new infrastructure. So whereas we absolutely acknowledge that the private car has a role in travel and people need to get to work and school, etc., equally, we must also be mindful and accommodate the more vulnerable road users, such as cyclists, and provide the infrastructure for them to also be able to, as it were, go about their business as well.
And look, I'm sure any motorist or road user will be quite happy to acknowledge the safety of cyclists and that there are measures in place to protect them. But I have to say, knowing that I had this interview coming up, I went out and drove on the Tulla Road last night. I drove it again this morning. And I can certainly understand some of the concerns that were raised by Angela in that interview, in that it's not just the height of these curbs, Cyril, but there is a significant gap between the curb and say the footpath where the cycle lane is in between. And if the blue lights came on behind you for a guard, for an ambulance, for a fire engine that was trying to get past, if your car was to get over one leg of it, you could almost get trapped inside it like a ditch. And they certainly say, and it's been the opinion of plenty of Tulla Road residents that are texting into us, that there's nowhere for them to go in the event of an emergency. And were the emergency services consulted in this? Was any of their feedback incorporated into the plans?
Yeah, so no, we did consult with our own emergency service, Clare Fire, County and Rescue Service. They don't share the concerns, perhaps, that the residents have. I'm assuming, Daragh, on your trip last night and this morning, you also observed the number of entranceways where those curbs, are broken, that we have to obviously continue to allow people access their own homes, access into estates, junctions, various junctions along the road as well. And that provides ample opportunity for people to be able to pull over safely without having to engage with the curbs, to allow emergency services pass. And they can also travel on, within the speed limit until it is safe to pull over to allow emergency services to pass. So we don't consider that to be an overriding issue on the scheme as designed currently on the Tulla Road.
The gaps between the curbs was certainly noticed, but considering that's a road that is often subject to bumper traffic, and even now that you still have construction ongoing to finish that active travel scheme, is it really realistic that people will get to use those gaps as much?
Well, I think so, absolutely. If we're still referring to the emergency services, absolutely, they're an ideal location to pull in to allow services to pass. And that can be on both sides of the road. You will find the emergency services travelling down the middle of the road where traffic moves left and right of them on the incoming and outgoing traffic. So we don't see that to be an issue, and it certainly hasn't been an issue so far with our own emergency service here with the fire brigade.
Is it possible to readdress this now? A lot of residents raising concerns, Cyril, and they are legitimately concerned that there could be an incident here that is going to have deadly consequences. Is there scope to revisit this or redesign it?
Well, as I said at the outset, Daragh, the scheme is absolutely designed in accordance with the design manual for urban roads and streets. So all of those concerns are factored into that design manual and the cycling design manual. So we're confident we have a scheme that's properly designed and being delivered on the Tulla Road. And obviously we're open to feedback, etc. And we do address feedback as it comes in, and people have raised concerns about certain elements of it, and we have adjusted very minor here and there. It might be the radius of a bend or something on the scheme, but overall we're confident the scheme is in compliance with the design standard.
Some of the other questions coming into us have related to flooding. Listeners and motorists say that in days of heavy rain, the cycle lane is essentially getting flooded, and that the cyclists are actually leaving the cycle lane and going out onto the road.
No, I'm not aware of the cycle lanes being flooded. As the scheme is progressing, it's been obviously done incremental. Sometimes the cyclists have to emerge back out onto the traffic, and that's fine because the cycle lane hasn't been completed along those sections. So I don't believe that's an issue with regard to flooding of the cycle lane, and drainage has been absolutely accounted for in the cycle lane design.
Some criticisms also, Cyril, and I'm sure this is something that you hear regularly, is that we've people telling us that they hardly see cyclists on that stretch of road, and they're questioning why such a high level of funding has gone into that rather than repairing the surfaces of roads across the county. For example, we have just a text in from a listener in 6 Mile Bridge this morning who's telling us about the condition of her roads, and that saying that if you drive through it for 2 hours in the morning and for 2 to 3 hours in the evening, you take your own life into your hands as it is so congested. It says double lines don't cost anything because they are completely ignored, and that the new footpaths there take up vital space and even make it more dangerous. So they're really questioning how money that the council is getting for projects is being used.
So with central government funding, it comes under many headings, and we have funding that we receive every year from the Department of Transport for the maintenance and repair of the road network, coupled with the council's own resources. So that's a funding stream, and it's utilised exactly as you've described there to repair the roads. Equally, we have funding from the National Transport Authority, and they want to develop cycling infrastructure, safer cycling infrastructure, and so hence we're investing that funding in the scheme on the Tulla Road. And I note the commentary there on, the narrowing of the roads as well, and that is a deliberate feature, Daragh, of the scheme. It is statistically and every other way proven that narrow roads, people focus more on their driving habits. When roads, they don't feel constrained, there's less attention to detail because you've far more space, is the perception to manoeuvre, etc. And when the roads are narrowed down, speeds drop. And that's demonstrable, and we can see that, and that is a good thing. We drive too fast on the roads. Statistics back that up. Unfortunate fatalities back that up. And so part of the scheme is to narrow the road deliberately to slow people down on the approach into an urban area. There are many residential housing estates, children, etc., on those road networks. And with respect to the idea that people don't use it, well, I think earlier in your commentary you commented on people exiting the cycle lane because they were flooded. Now, as I said, I didn't concur with that opinion. I'm also aware of a great group of school children who cycle to the Gaelskull, and they come in along the road prior even to this investment, but they're so looking forward to it. They have an app that they calculate the amount of carbon emissions that they save, depending on the number of children each morning. They tap it into the app, and they've sent us screenshots of that. And that's a wonderful initiative, and we'd like to see more of that, in the coming months as the scheme is fully developed.
And just before we finish up, Cyril, we have one more message in here who is from a listener who says he's living on that section of the Tulla Road, and just text in, it says that I have to cross over to the wrong side of the road to get out of the entrance of my gate. It says my back tyre cannot turn with the curb. He claims that he couldn't move out of the way last week for an ambulance that was behind him with lights and sirens on, and further says that there is no room to move in and out of the way for these vehicles at present. But I suppose just with the regards to the start of that comment that this listener says he has to cross over to the wrong side of the road to get out of his entrance at the gate with those active travel conditions that are in place at the moment. Is there somewhere he can raise that he can take it to the council's attention to hopefully get it rectified?
He can absolutely. He can email our active travel office here in the council. It's activetraveloffice@clarecoco.ie, and somebody will absolutely look at his particular concern.
Cyril Feeney, Senior Engineer with Clare County Council. Cyril, thank you very much for joining us on the programme today.
Thank you, Daragh.
That was Cyril Feeney there from Clare County Council.